Hi. Today I thought I would talk about I was watching this podcast like last week and the week before a little bit. Um, and this person on this podcast, he was talking about he grew up in like a very systematically abusive, atrocious, horrible childhood. Um, and he talked about going through that experience and feeling like so broken, so defiled that he started to feel more like a creature than a human being. And he talked about growing up that he felt more comfortable, like he would run away from his family and find a pack of like feral wolves, and he would hide away from his family for a couple days with these wolves, and he felt more comfortable with the wolves than he did with human beings. And in some ways, like the wolves were safer for him than his family. Um, and I think is a really interesting way to look at unconsciousness, of just thinking about how the more beaten, broken, and lost in pain we become, even if we're a victim and a child and the one surviving it, the more the tendency when we're living in an environment that is consistently hurting us is we are going to become more primal, animalistic, feral. And during if we're in an environment that's consistently hurting us, that's survival. That's what's going to keep you safe. But then we grow up as an adult and we have to try and figure out how to start to find our way out of that and start to realize, okay, what are feeding the more animalistic and primal aspects of myself that aren't going to lead me to being a really good functioning human being? And what are the ways that things that I do that actually are helping heal and repair and restore my humanness and my like my self-worth in a lot of ways. And something else to mention in abuse, that when we go through, is when we're consistently living in an environment in abuse and we've been living in that place for many years, we can can create a lens over our eyes where we start to see everyone through the eyes of they're not safe, because of how unsafe the people that were supposed to love and protect us really were. And it also, the more we become lost in pain, the more we feel like I don't belong. Is usually, if you ever listen, and I definitely have felt this for a lot of my life, is while my journey hasn't been anything close to the person in the podcast that I mentioned, um, in regards to like pain or degrees of abuse, but I did go through some mistreatment, some levels of abuse, and I definitely did feel like for a long time like an outsider looking in, like everyone else was having a good time, and I felt like I was just alone in my misery. And eventually we start to wake up out of that, and we start to realize, oh, everyone's miserable in their own ways, typically, or most people are. It's just some people are better at hiding it than others, or some people have a little less misery than others because they've been through less trauma and abuse. But that doesn't mean that I'm separate or different than anyone else. I'm just gone through a different level of pain than maybe my peers or my friends or the people I'm around. And going through high school, I definitely felt for a good, like I was always the person hurting the worst out of all my friends, out of the people I was in high school with. Like I seemed to be one of the kids who had it the least together, and 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 definitely found, in high school, I was going through mistreatment, and then I also started to find myself in an addiction of pornography, and pornography feeds your unconsciousness. It feeds the parts of yourselves that are serving cravings and desires, while ignoring the toxicity or harm of using something like that. And it really is a drug. It gives you a dopamine hit, just like any other type of like any type of thing people might use to try and forget who they are for a second, like using pornography and masturbating, right? Is a great way to like not feel how you feel, and it's a great way to check out and numb yourself by looking at something that's really stimulating. And the more stimulated you are, the less you can actually feel how you feel. And for someone going through mistreatment or living in an environment that's more toxic, that becomes really appealing, right? But it's really the toxicity that I'm growing up with becomes the toxicity I'm attracted to, in ways of coping with the toxicity I'm dealing with at home, or I'm dealing with the mistreatment of friends or family or wherever I'm receiving mistreatment. And and so with pornography is like really is something that's going to suffocate your innocence, and it's going to make you constantly think about sex. And for me, like, I felt alone a lot in high school, and so thinking about sex and using pornography was a way of like seeing, some level, there is still some level of intimacy there. And since my life felt so starved of intimacy and connection in a lot of ways, it it it's helped soothe that part of me, but also was a way of getting me lost in darker and darker fantasies around sex. And if you use pornography regularly, you start to realize, wow, I constantly think about sex now that I'm using this. And unconsciousness, this analogy came to me when I was thinking about this talk, about talking about how our unconsciousness really turns us more into a creature. And in a lot of ways, in high school, I felt like a little bit of a creature for sex. And even though I was only really feeding that pattern through pornography and not playing it out with other people, you know, we start to realize the more I feed desires and cravings, the less power I have over those desires and cravings, and the more reactive and impulsive I become towards continuing to feed those desires. And the less control I have of being able to rein it in, or being able to be discerning of, is would it actually be serve my well-being to share intimacy with that person in that way. And I think oftentimes, like, a lot of people that really crave sex are people that just generally crave touch more than other people. And I also think, the intensity of sex is a great way to forget our unworthiness and our pain, right? And especially, sex can be beautiful, and it's not something I have a ton of experience with, but besides pornography use and watching people do like in that way, but it's something that when we're like seeking it casually, we're using it in a way of, it's helping me forget the pain I'm in often. It's helping me forget my unworthiness. And then that becomes, oh, when someone chooses to have sex with me, then I feel more worthy because they chose me. But it's really reaffirming when we're using sex casually, oh, hey, like, I don't feel good enough about myself to have good, healthy boundaries around sex, right? And so that, coupled with when other people choose me, makes me think I have more worth, which is really a thought rather than a reality, and that worth is never really going to stick. Is kind of the pattern that feeds casual hookups. And when I was thinking about this talk to now, I was thinking about this like analogy of a cave. And when you're starting to feed unconsciousness and you're starting to get lost in an addiction, it's almost like a child, because any type of child, it takes the maturity of a child to not know if this is toxic or if this is serving my well-being. And sometimes it's a little hard to tell, like, is coffee good for me, or is it not serving my well-being? Like, there is things that maybe are a little bit harder to tell, but oftentimes the child goes and explores a cave, and the child, there's going to become a point in the when the child's exploring the cave where it can still see the entrance of the cave, and then it can see the darkness, and typically or it sees further down the cave that's completely dark. And typically when we end up getting lost in the addiction, right, and we're only want to explore the dark because we're running from our pain. We're running from our anger, our unworthiness, our resentment, all the ways we get mistreated by friends or family, all the ways that we don't take care of ourselves, or we take our anger and aggression out in ourselves. Maybe even that's just the words I say to myself in my head, right? All the ways that we continue to harm ourselves or other harms us makes us want to have an escape. And that then leads the child to going, what if I explored a little deeper in the cave? And then all of a sudden, that human, that child, but sometimes we still have children, parts of ourselves that haven't really grown up when we're an adult, and that's why we find addictions in adulthood sometimes too, is that, we're not always, they say in psychology that most people, if you're not addicted to something by 25, you're probably not going to have a major addiction in your life. But, it's also good to note that, sometimes we have parts of ourselves that never really grew up, and the ways that we didn't grow up becomes how we can fall into childlike behavior, like finding an addiction even as an adult. And um and the child then goes deeper into the cave to run from, right, the world, and how it actually, and the pain in the world, and it ends up getting lost in the cave. And the cave is a great metaphor for all the ways that we get lost in pain by running from our pain. And then all the cave, right, is gritty, it's dirty, there's bugs. And if we don't try and find our way out of the cave after getting lost, right, the cave becomes home and it becomes familiar, and then all we know is darkness, and darkness becomes the loudest voice in our head. And we start to think that dark, feeding our pain, feeding our unworthiness, whether that's through casual hookups, whether that's through any type of drug addiction, or any type of even it could be something like the ways I splurge on shopping, but when I don't have the money to spend on that, and I do that every day or every week, right? The ways that we live in irrationality, it becomes normal, and it becomes familiar, and we start to go, this cave keeps me safe. And it really is just you feeding your pain, thinking it's keeping you safe from your pain, but it's actually only growing greater pain within you, which was like my experience with pornography. Like, for me, I thought in my head, as a 13-year-old starting to use pornography, I thought, oh, this is going to make me good at sex. But it really was just suffocating my ability to actually have the depth to be able to listen to people and form genuine connection with others. And it made me prioritize, at the time, desires and cravings over forming safe, genuine connections with others. And since that felt so unsafe to me, I went through high school not forming connections with others, because there was some level of awareness within me that recognized that I didn't feel very safe. And so instead of trying to, and that unsafety kept me from connecting with others in general. And there's two kinds of addictions, right? I either play my addictions out with others, or I play my addiction out in private and try to hide it from the world. And I was too, but neither way is a good path, right? There's no better way. They're just different. And so and we start to become, oh, the cave is what keeps me safe. And the more I live in the cave, the more reactive, impulsive, the more animalistic and primal I become, which I definitely felt in high school. And like, And the voice of the cave, if we were to give it a voice, the voice of unconsciousness, which is this cave, would be feed me. And it's feed my desires, feed my cravings while ignoring your well-being. While ignoring, is it actually a good idea to, to share sex with someone that I barely know and be having doing something that is literally the deepest energy swap and deepest microbiome swap you could share with another person, right? That doesn't make any sense to do that casually. And we are told that that affirms our worth. And so especially for guys, we think, oh, we need to go do this because this will heal my unworthiness, but it actually feeds your unworthiness and keeps you lost in feeding desires rather than feeding well-being, which is having good boundaries and not sharing your deepest energy swap and deepest microbiome swap with people you don't know. And that doesn't, this isn't to try and create shame and guilt if we do if we do have sex casually with people, but it's something to look at. Is that really something that is going to serve deep, vulnerable connection with others? Or is that me building relationships based off transactions, which is I feed your desires, you feed my desires, and we'll stay together as long as we choose to feed these desires together. And as soon as one of us finds a more deep, meaningful relationship, right, they tend to cut out anyone that isn't aligned with greater depth and greater vulnerability, which casual hookups are based on, typically are based on feeding cravings rather than actually feeding genuine heartfelt connection. And it's just something to be aware of. I don't have to, right? Being hard on myself and beating myself up for the addictions I'm lost in or the ways I feed desires rather than feeding long-term relationships, that's not going to do anything either. That's just going to make you feel more beat up. And it's like, okay, can I try a little bit better to have a little bit better boundaries in my life? Okay, can I try to work to get to know people, right, at the very least before I choose to be physically intimate with them? And the way I live my life, and I've talked about this multiple times, but I live my life and I get to know people as friends. It doesn't matter how hot or how attractive they are. I just get to know them as a friend, right? And if it's meant to be a more committed long-term relationship, you will see that getting to know them. But 99% of the people you meet are going to feel like everyone else, which means you'll meet them and you go, I don't really feel any different than the other five people I've met at this event, right? And that's usually typically a good sign of, okay, this person is just meant to be someone I can connect with, to form a friendship with, and see, can I have good boundaries with this person? Because you're only going to be able to manifest like a dream relationship or an incredible romantic relationship by first establishing good boundaries in your life. Because let's say you find your dream romantic relationship and you haven't practiced having good boundaries, right? Then you're going to be cuddling with someone or you're going to be dancing with someone. Maybe you go to Latin dancing or ecstatic dancing, you're dancing with someone that's sensual, and you're not going to be able to hold yourself back from keeping that in friendship. And so it's why we practice stuff like that. So we can have good boundaries in our life when we do meet the right person. And with hookups and with casual dating and with all of that, you're gonna find more fulfilling relationships by just prioritizing friendships in your life than you are gonna find it by finding casual intimacy. And is the casual intimacy you're finding serving the long-term relationship with that person, or is it just serving your desires, right? Is it serving, right? There's two kind of standpoints if you're casually dating. It's either I don't want to have a long-term relationship with this person, and so it's casual intimacy, but I don't really care about this person. And so it doesn't matter to me if it falls apart. That's one standpoint. And then the other standpoint is, oh, I really, I do care about this person. And I have in my head that if I have sex with this person, it will create greater vulnerability, but it really just creates greater attachment to someone when you have sex with them. Doesn't mean you're going to have a deeper relationship necessarily, just means you're going to be more attached to them, which is a little bit of a perspective shift. And so those two standpoints, if you're casually hooking up with someone, so one, I don't want a long-term relationship with this person. Well, if you don't want a long-term relationship with that person, then you probably shouldn't be having sex with them. Probably shouldn't be sharing microbiome and energy on the deepest, most intimate level you could with that person. And then the other, if I enjoy connecting with this person, I want this person to long term be in my life, right? You know, on it, like when you're forming attachment with people, you're essentially you're essentially building attachment that when you're having sex with someone and you don't think it's, you maybe want this person in your life, but you don't really want a long-term romantic relationship with this person, right? You're essentially creating an out of balance relationship where your actions aren't matching your intentions. And then that relationship is doomed to fall apart because it's almost like building a building where some of the support beams weren't put in the right place. And that person most of the time, like a lot of the time, like it's going to fall apart and you won't have that person in your life. And probably one person will feel a little bit hurt and used by that interaction, right? Especially if there was some love there or some genuine connection while you guys were getting to know each other. And so it's really, boundaries is a way of spread, like healthy boundaries where you're getting to know people as friends is a way of spreading less hurt and heartbreak on this planet by and being safe of I'm not going to prioritize my desires over the well-being of your heart. Right. And if you desire greater connection with me, maybe we can cuddle, maybe we can maybe we can dance sensually even, right? But holding the boundaries. It's will feed greater relationships. It will feed greater depth, and it will help you feel proud about how you live your life and not like your desires and cravings are running your life. And you will find yourself in like no situationships, and life will become so much more peaceful, and your relationships will become so much more peaceful and harmonious and less dramatic. And I think one of the things people don't think about is often the people casually dating, casually hooking up with people are a little addicted to drama. And if you meet people who do feed that pattern regularly, you can even hear it about how they talk. They love to talk about drama. And this kind of segues. Oh, and so to bring it back to the cave analogy, there was one thing I think I want to mention about that is so when I was kind of like really getting to a place of wanting to stop using pornography, which was 18, and the universe gave me some help in doing that as well. But when I was 18, I did this Vipassana meditation. And in the Vipassana meditation, it was like 2 days or 2.5 days where you just meditate all day in silence. And kind of funny, I had a cold during this Vipassana meditation. It's supposed to be sick, and I have like this deep, raspy cough. And so I like literally went through a whole bag of cough drops, like 50 cough drops during the meditation, the 2 day meditation. So I wasn't like constantly coughing in this silent meditation room. But during that meditation, like had not stopped using pornography at that time. And like, while I wasn't using it during the retreat, I like literally watched my mind for those 2.5 days just think about sex the whole time, nonstop, like a constant loop, right? And one really highlighted to me, wow, I'm really lost in this pattern. and And two, also, when I came out of that Vipassana meditation, I felt some of the deepest peace and stillness, and it felt like the clouds around my head had parted. And while I didn't effortlessly find my way out of pornography after that, it did give me a little bit of break. And I think, when we're trying to find our way out of the cave of darkness, one of the things that can give us a little bit of a state change or break, it probably won't solve it for us instantaneously, but it will help clear some of the darkness if we feel really lost in pain, is to find stillness, is to develop a stillness practice. And that doesn't mean I need, you would probably be better served meditating for 10 minutes twice a day than you would be trying to meditate for a couple hours a day, because I talk about it in other videos. It's really important to stay grounded, and it's really important to have breaks and using meditation more as a way of helping me find moments of peace, rather than I find peace in my meditation and then live the rest of my day how it goes. But and this doesn't mean you can't meditate for longer, but it's just like you doing little 10, 20, 30 minute meditations for most people is probably going to serve them a little bit better than an hour. And I'm someone that I still do an hour, sometimes when I have the time, and that feels good too. So we all we all have to be mindful. But if we're just getting into meditation, right, it's a lot less daunting to do 10 minutes once or twice a day than to say I'm going to sit down and meditate for an hour. And using meditation as a way of cultivating stillness, because stillness is the divine feminine. You can think about the divine feminine as the nothingness, the space that holds all of existence, and then within that is like the everything that we are experiencing in this planet, on other planets, in other dimensions. But the feminine is like the womb that holds everything, and the womb is dark and spacious, kind of like a cave. And so when you're aligning yourself with stillness, right? And if we feel really lost in addiction, also a Vipassana meditation where you're meditating, for 2, 5, maybe even 7 days. I'd say at 7, that's probably a good cap. Like you always, if you're meditating all day, you always want to set an end date, because it can be a little addictive in its own right to feel peace and spacious and not have to worry about the hardships of our life or the world or what we're struggling with. It's like a break from that. But that break can also have its own pull and addiction, especially if we are lost in addictions at the time. And so always setting an end date's really important, right? And it's probably better to do it with a group or do it with someone that's guiding this Vipassana meditation. But for me, what I really found is when I was lost in darkness, aligning myself in the stillness, which is the darkness of the divine feminine, actually really helped give me space from the darkness and break through some of the clouds of the darkness that I couldn't find my way out of at the time. And so whether we want to start with just a gentle 10-minute once or twice a day, or maybe even 3 times a day, or just want to start with, or want to go do a Vipassana meditation retreat, I would recommend that, especially if we're in some type of addiction, right? Because it's almost like practicing sitting with your cravings and desires, and addictions are fed off of reactive and impulsive feeding your cravings and desires. And so it's cultivating the opposite, and it's cultivating what you need, the skill you need to actually move beyond that addiction. And in that, that doesn't mean that we think meditation is a cure-all, or that I'm going to now live like meditating 8 hours a day, right? And because that, we have to use meditation as a way, whatever I feel in my meditation, I then apply it to my life, rather than meditation becomes my life. And even orienting ourselves towards more love and care, so that unconsciousness is I'm ignoring care, saying I don't care, and doing things that are toxic, that are self-soothing. And consciousness would be, I care about myself so much, I'm going to work to move beyond the toxicity I choose regularly. And so the more we can even just like take the negative voices in our head and we say, I love you, negative voices. I see you, negative voices. I'm grateful for your thoughts, right? I'm grateful for you showing me the pain I've survived that I'm still working on healing, right? Stuff like that. Or even, how can I make choices to care for myself better each day? Maybe that's working out. Maybe that's eating a clean diet. Maybe that's making sure I floss every morning and every night. Maybe that's making sure that I have a good skincare routine, right? The little ways we adopt care actually aligns us with greater consciousness and will help us find our way out of unconsciousness a lot easier. And for me in my journey, when I really started to find my way out of unconsciousness, which I would say happened around 21, right? I went vegetarian. I I was doing yoga more regularly, and I stopped drinking caffeine, and all of that stuff actually did help me start. And I even stopped looking at like half naked people on Instagram. And all that stuff really helped find my way out of like letting go of pornography in a lot of ways. And I still fell back into it once after that, but it really did make a huge difference in my life. And so looking at how can I choose in ways that bring greater care to me, and how can I love the darkened aspects of myself more, will shift how hard it is for us not to self-soothe through toxic means. And this kind of transitions into the next thing I want to talk about in regards to that. Something that happens in spirituality is we either are become spiritual, but we don't really apply it to our life and we continue to live the same, or we become spiritual and the toxic things we did when we weren't spiritual, we just find new spiritual ways to feed that toxicity. Which is crazy. It's crazy, right? And looking at, okay, how do I stimulate myself? Do I stimulate myself through caffeine? Do I stimulate myself through overusing technology? Sometimes I overuse technology, so it's okay. Like, I'm not perfect. We're all not perfect. We're all healing. Do I overstimulate myself by I don't know, um, over masturbating? What do I do that really feels like out of balance in my life and actually knocks me out of balance? And a great way to realize, is this serving me or is this knocking me out of balance, is how stimulating is this for me to do? And that's something like people don't realize. I think like for me, like I haven't really drank caffeine since I was 21, and like then finding ecstatic dance, everyone's like, oh, cacao is amazing. And I'm not going to say that it doesn't have benefits, or I don't really feel the heart opening effect, but maybe it does do that. But to me, drinking cacao feels like I'm drinking coffee. And you see this so much in spirituality, is like spiritual people just find ways to feed the same addictive patterns, but to make it spiritual, right? Instead of I'm outside smoking cigarettes, I'm now smoking some Peruvian herb and blowing it on people and calling it healing for people. And maybe that is healing, but it's like it feels like we're just high school and we just took all the things we did in high school and made it spiritual. And when we were looking at unconsciousness, unconsciousness is always irrational, and it's always going to prioritize stimulation over well-being. And so recognizing, right, for me, when I drink cacao, I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. And so if you, if you feel really stimulated using something, it probably isn't serving your well-being. And can we work to cut down on the substances that are stimulating, as a way of cultivating greater stillness, which would open up greater peace, harmony, and balance within our system? And can we, like the greatest master drugs, you could like if you want to be like if you're like I want to be a spiritual master, the three greatest drugs you that masters use is nature, the breath, and light. And anything after that is probably something that most of the time you don't really need and would actually knock you out of balance if you used regularly. And if you stick to that, you will find your way into an incredible level of consciousness. I guarantee it. And even something of like looking at what ways am I still feeding the predator parts of myself? And I would even say, while some people's bodies are going to do better eating meat, right? And some people go, I feel a lot better eating meat than I do being vegetarian. It's like, okay, listen to your body, but also recognizing that if you're killing an animal, like that is a predator act. And it is to the tiniest degree probably feeding a little bit more of your animalistic primal aspect of yourself than it is the softness, gentleness, and and and, and honoring all of life that consciousness is, and recognizing that. And we still have to listen to your body, and maybe your body's very different than mine, and it doesn't feel good eating vegetables, and it feels great eating animals. Okay, I'm not the cornerstone of knowing everything, but I do know it's a simple awareness of like looking at the pattern of like if I were to play with the baby chicken or the baby cow that I then one day had to kill to feed my family, right? A lot of people would have a hard time doing that. And a lot of people go, I won't eat my dog or cat, but I'll eat this cow and chicken, when the only reason why you would eat that cow and chicken is there's separation. You didn't raise that cow or chicken. You didn't get to know that cow or chicken or form a bond and connection with it. And so then we go, oh, it's okay to eat. But that's a little crazy in my mind. And maybe I'm maybe maybe I'm wrong, but it's something to look at. And it's something to look at, if I'm going to eat meat, maybe can I eat a lot less of it, because we live in a culture that prioritizes, at least in the United States, eating meat for every meal. And it's like even the Native Americans probably took a break from eating buffalo. Like they probably like had days where they ate salads, and and recognizing that your body, like for me, I'm vegan, and my body feels like it has way more energy. I feel like I like even in workouts, like my body feels like it has a little bit longer of a battery life than some of the friends I work out with, or used to work out with. I'm not working out too much right now because of I have some injuries, but I had a like longer battery life than some of the friends I would go and work out with who weren't vegan. And recognizing that your body, for most people, their bodies would feel fine eating plant-based, and less innocent animals have to die if we people ate vegetables, and vegetables, have a little bit less feelings than animals. They're a little bit of a different consciousness, and it's honoring life more to be plant-based than it is to be eat animals. And I'm a little biased, but I think it's something to look at. I probably don't need to eat meat every day. And could I even explore being vegetarian or vegan and see, I might even feel better eating that way, and I literally would be killing less animals and feeding less suffering and less death on this planet by eating that way. Mm. And so, what I want to close out with is just, can we look at our life, and can we look at the ways I feed patterns that might be a little bit more animalistic, primal, predatorial? I might feed patterns of feed patterns of that might be feeding more desires than actually serving life, serving well-being? And can I work to love the parts of myself that are darkened, to love my negativity, and I can listen to it and can I love it, but not feed it, right? Can I listen to my depression, but when I'm depressed, go, okay, I have to go live a day where I prioritize my joy and excitement rather than curling up in a ball and not moving all day, because that will only feed the stagnancy which depression is. Or can I love my anxiety and hear my anxiety rather than continuing to live in such a rushed and fast paced way, or start to listen to why am I feeling so anxious? Because anxiety is a message. It's not necessarily something I have to live with, and we only think we have to live with it when we're not listening to the message. And can I look at my despair and the heaviness and go, okay, these are days when I need to do things that really bring me joy and make me happy, because it's the only way this despair and heaviness isn't going to consume me. And recognizing that the ways we can care for ourselves, the ways we care for our feelings, the way we love our mind and our thoughts, the ways we care for this body is what creates the peace and harmony and allows the petals of our heart to fully open, which then starts to transform you, but it also transforms the people you're connected to, because they're now being more exposed to love, to gentleness, to harmony, and they will start to unconsciously start to shift towards that more, that because consciousness and unconsciousness are both all consuming, and we have the choice of what we align with. And when we choose to align more often in consciousness, right, we are going to become a frequency that's more powerful than even other people's unconsciousness, because consciousness is consciousness, and it harmonizes and balances the people we even interact with when we're really living in that alignment. If we want the world to reach to peace, we have to look at how can I create greater peace in the way I eat? How can I create greater peace in my body? How can I stand for peace in my actions day after day, which will harmonize more and more of the people I connect with and interact with peace and with worth and with value and with good boundaries that will create the changes we wish to see on a global level, right? It starts with a person. And the more people embody that, the more easily things will start to shift on a global level. So I hope that helps. Thank you for listening, and I hope you all have a beautiful day. Bye.